Before we begin, viewer discretion is strongly advised. What you're about to hear is courtroom testimony presented for educational and entertainment purposes only. On the 7th day of Sean Diddy Combs' federal trial, the atmosphere in the courtroom shifted. The name called to the stand wasn't a government agent or a music executive. It was Sheila E. To most, she's Prince's iconic percussionist. But that day, she wasn't just an artist. She was a messenger of something far more ominous. She spoke not just for herself, but for someone who is no longer here to speak at all. Prince. The courtroom froze as she began to recount things Prince had shared with her in the years before his mysterious death. Claims of being watched, of being silenced, of parties that were never about music, and of a name that kept surfacing in whispered warnings. Diddy. Why did Prince fear him? What exactly happened at the parties he said you can't unsee? And did Sheila just confirm what many dismissed as conspiracy for years? What follows is a chilling mosaic of testimony, secrets, and the story Prince tried to tell before it was too late. Sheila E. took her seat with a calm resolve that belied the weight of what she was about to say. The courtroom was hushed, every eye fixed on the woman once known for electrifying stages with Prince. Now she was here to electrify something else. The truth. She began by saying she never imagined testifying in a case like this. But when the subpoenas started and the headlines broke, she knew it was time. Because years earlier, Prince had told her something she couldn't shake. One day this will all come out. When it does, don't stay silent. According to Sheila, Prince had become increasingly uneasy in the final years of his life. Not paranoid, vigilant. He warned her that the music industry wasn't just about who owned your masters. It was about who owned you. Sheila described a specific late-night phone call. Prince's voice was tense. "They're playing God out here," he said. "If I speak too loud, they'll shut me down." He named names, and one of them kept returning, like an echo, Diddy. She testified that Prince feared Diddy wasn't just involved in the business of music, but in something darker. Sheila paused, looked straight at the jury, and said, "He believed Diddy had crossed the line from artist to enforcer." Sheila recalled Prince warning her to avoid certain parties. He said, "You don't want to be in that room. Things happen there you can't unsee." At the time, she thought he was exaggerating. But that changed after a trip to Los Angeles. Prince returned different, quiet, haunted. He kept repeating, "They know I know." That line echoed in court like a ghostly refrain. Then Sheila dropped the moment that froze the room. Diddy had once hosted a party, not at a hotel, not at a club, but at Prince's own estate, Paisley Park. And Prince didn't want it there. "He told me this wasn't his party anymore," she said. Something bad came in with him that night. And from that point on, Prince told her everything changed. The courtroom was riveted. Because this wasn't just gossip. It was sworn testimony, connecting a beloved icon, a powerful mogul, and an industry filled with shadows. The deeper Sheila went, the more disturbing her testimony became. According to her, Prince wasn't just speaking in metaphors. He believed the music industry had transformed into a machinery of control, where talent was just a bait and silence was the real currency. She recounted conversations where Prince said he no longer felt safe, not because of his fame, but because of what he knew. "They don't just want your hits," he told her. "They want your silence, and if they can't buy it, they'll bury you." Sheila described a disturbing trend. The more outspoken Prince became, the more isolated he felt. He believed his phones were tapped, his movements watched, and that some of the people closest to him were reporting back to powerful entities. It was a system, he said, built to groom, monitor, and when needed, eliminate. According to Sheila, the heart of this system was surveillance. Prince warned her, They record everything. Even what you don't know is being recorded. At first, she thought he meant social media or paparazzi, but he clarified. He meant private parties, meetings, studio sessions. The footage, he claimed, was stored, archived, and weaponized. And Diddy, Prince believed, was not just part of it. He was helping run it. He told me Diddy knew how to collect secrets, Sheila testified. Not to protect anyone, but to control them. Prince allegedly said these exclusive gatherings weren't about networking or celebration. They were tests, traps, rooms filled with substances, temptations, and hidden cameras. "You walk in free," Prince once said, "but if you're not careful, you walk out owned." Sheila shared that Prince once mentioned hearing stories from other artists, some who vanished from the charts, others who spiraled into scandal or disappearance. To him, it wasn't coincidence. It was punishment for trying to break free. He said the most dangerous place in the industry isn't the stage, Sheila told the court. It's the party afterward. That's where the real contracts get signed. The jury listened, stunned, as she described an entire ecosystem, built not on talent or art, but leverage, hidden cameras, NDAs, manipulation masked as opportunity. And in the center of it all, Prince believed, were people like Diddy, gatekeepers who didn't just own music. They owned people. What shook the courtroom next was something deeply personal, an event Sheila said marked a turning point in Prince's life. She testified that in 2006, Prince agreed, reluctantly, to let Diddy host a private industry gathering at Paisley Park, his sacred creative sanctuary. According to Sheila, it wasn't his idea. Prince told me he was pressured by mutual industry associates, she said. He didn't want it. He didn't trust it. It was supposed to be a professional mixer. Invitations were sent to top executives, artists, and influencers. But what actually happened that night left Prince rattled in a way Sheila had never seen. At first, it was glamorous. Red carpet arrivals, champagne, paparazzi at the gates. But once the press left and the lights dimmed, the energy changed. The security staff said no one could bring in their phones or their own security teams, Sheila recalled. Prince looked at me and said, "This isn't my party anymore." Inside, Sheila described a surreal scene. Celebrities engaging in behavior that felt staged, performances that grew increasingly provocative, and a strange detachment from reality. There was a private section of the estate that was completely closed off, accessible only to a select few. Prince didn't go in, neither did Sheila. But whatever happened behind that door, Prince didn't want it in his home. The next morning, he told me, that was the last time I let him in my house. Something bad came in with him. Sheila explained that from that night forward, Prince changed. He tightened his circle, canceled appearances, and became obsessed with security. He even began researching how to erase digital traces of his movements. He told me, "I opened the door to something, and now I can't close it." When asked by the prosecution if she believed that party changed Prince forever, Sheila didn't hesitate. "Absolutely," she said. It confirmed everything he feared about Diddy and the people protecting him. What had begun as a simple industry event turned into a line-crossing moment. A night that haunted Prince and may have triggered the series of investigations and revelations that followed. And now, that night was being dissected in federal court. Sheila's testimony then moved into even darker territory. One that echoed through the courtroom like a warning shot across the industry's most guarded walls. She claimed Prince began uncovering a pattern, one that involved not just manipulation, but documentation. According to him, these elite parties were being filmed, not by accident, not for art, but for leverage. He told me flat out, Sheila said, "They film everything. That's how they get you." Prince described a system where newcomers were invited under the guise of opportunity, then presented with temptations, substances, scenarios, setups. Cameras were hidden in plain sight, in ceiling corners and mirrored walls. What began as a wild night could become a weapon. He said it wasn't about catching mistakes. It was about creating them, Sheila explained. And once they had the footage, they owned you. She testified that Prince feared even appearing in the background of these recordings. He began avoiding events entirely. His paranoia, she said, wasn't irrational. It was based on what he'd seen happen to others. Artists who said no to certain people began to disappear. Not literally, but from the charts, from the airwaves, from the spotlight. Prince reportedly referred to Diddy not as a peer, but as a handler. He knew what people wanted and what they feared, Sheila recalled. He didn't just throw the parties, he curated them, he controlled the narrative afterward. At one point, Prince told her he had begun investigating who was storing the footage. He thought there were vaults of tapes, Sheila said, blackmail currency, ready to be used if anyone stepped out of line. And then came the most chilling part. Sheila recounted their last late-night phone call, just days before Prince's death. It was past 2 a.m. She remembered because he never called that late. His voice was quiet. "They're watching me," he said. "They want me quiet." She said he didn't name names, but he didn't have to. "I knew who he meant," Sheila said. "He always warned me about them, the gatekeepers. He said he was going to speak out, that plans were already underway, but before anything could be made public, he was gone. He was gone." And for the first time, the courtroom considered that Prince's death might not just be tragic, but timely. After Sheila's chilling testimony, prosecutors shifted gears and delivered a move that jolted the courtroom: evidence. This wasn't just storytelling anymore. This was substance, paperwork, audio, metadata. First, they introduced a sealed envelope from Prince's personal attorney, opened in camera and summarized for the jury. Inside were photocopies of 3 NDAs. The first, signed by a female vocalist, described a coerced performance at a 2010 party in the Hamptons, allegedly linked to Diddy's circle. The second, signed by a male session guitarist, referenced footage of compromising activities recorded during a private Miami studio party. The third was unsigned, but drafted for an emerging rapper. It detailed hush money terms, including what would happen if he declined an invitation to special appearances. Alongside the NDAs was a typed memo from Prince's lawyer. It said Prince had received these documents from a trusted insider at a major label, and he was planning to go public, with names, dates, and contracts. Then came the audio. Prosecutors played a recovered file from a Paisley Park backup drive. In it, Prince rehearsed what sounded like a never-released interview. "They'll call it networking," he said, "but it's harvesting. Young artists go in thinking it's a party. They leave owing a debt, measured in silence." The room leaned in. Prince's voice, his cadence, echoing everything Sheila had testified to, and it didn't stop there. Next, prosecutors called a financial analyst who had worked with Prince's estate. He presented a trail of transactions, payments routed through shell companies to boutique, security firms, all staffed by ex-military contractors. Those firms were tied to private events on the exact dates Cassie and now Sheila had referenced. Invoices were coded with phrases like VIP liaison and venue lighting, the same labels Cassie claimed were used to mask expenses related to escorts and surveillance. But the real gasp came with the hotel data. Prosecutors had subpoenaed logs from a luxury hotel chain. They revealed that at 3 a.m., the night before Prince's emergency landing, someone remotely reissued his digital room key, just hours after he had called Sheila and said, "They're outside my door." The implication? Unauthorized access, tampering, proof that someone might have been following him. Individually, each piece might have been circumstantial, but together, they painted something more, a lattice of control, secrecy, and fear. NDAs describing coercion, Prince's voice warning about it. Money trails pointing to cover-ups, digital breadcrumbs confirming surveillance. It was as if Prince had started building a legal case of his own, one that prosecutors were now picking up midstream. By the time the analyst stepped down, the courtroom had changed. This wasn't just a he said, she said anymore. It was data, dated, documented. Disturbing, the prosecution rested for the day. But what they left hanging in the air was clear. If Prince's warnings were true, this wasn't just about Diddy's guilt. It was about a system unraveling. By the end of the day, something had shifted, not just in the courtroom, but across the entire entertainment industry. For the first time since the trial began, Diddy appeared visibly shaken. Observers noted that he avoided eye contact with the gallery. When his attorneys leaned in to speak, he barely responded. He kept his eyes locked on the wood grain of the defense table, as if trying to disappear into it. Outside the courthouse, the tremors were immediate. Veteran producers began posting cryptic emojis. Legacy journalists who once dismissed Prince's warnings as eccentric paranoia started backtracking. A global hashtag, Trust Paisley Prophecy, began trending by nightfall. Inside Bad Boy Entertainment's Manhattan offices, whispers turned into panic. Sources said 2 senior executives abruptly went on indefinite leave within an hour of the hotel key metadata reveal. At Warner Music, a memo instructed employees to preserve all historical documentation related to artist agreements. The implication? A storm was coming, and streaming platforms weren't immune either. At least one major service quietly launched, a task force to audit private footage hosted on its servers, archival performances, exclusive interviews, VIP intimate sets. The fear wasn't just lawsuits, it was subpoenas. Meanwhile, the courtroom was bracing for more. Judge Subramanian called an emergency in-chambers conference to discuss the expanded evidentiary scope. Prosecutors hinted that additional sealed materials, possibly direct links between Diddy's legal entities and shell companies, were still forthcoming. Back on the record, Sheila E.'s words continued to ripple. Legal pundits began to suggest that Prince, unintentionally or not, had become the first posthumous whistleblower, a ghost testifying through documents, voice files, and the people he trusted most. And for many watching, it was no longer just about Diddy. It was about the system, a system where young artists are enticed, exploited, silenced. A system where blackmail trumps talent, where NDAs are used not to protect privacy, but to bury truth. One entertainment law firm received over 300 calls in 24 hours, artists seeking to review or revoke old contracts. Others, worried their past might be on tape, began hiring crisis managers. And some simply disappeared from public view entirely. In court, Diddy's defense tried to regroup. They began laying the groundwork for cross-examining Sheila's credibility. But there was a problem: the data. You can discredit a memory, you can poke holes in a witness. But how do you refute metadata, voice recordings, and money trails? By the end of the day, even conservative commentators were calling it what it was: a reckoning, not just for a man, but for an era. As court adjourned and cameras flashed, the story no longer belonged to just the courtroom. It belonged to all of us. Prince once said, "What they do in the dark comes out in the music. Listen closely, you'll hear the pain." But now, that pain was echoing in legal transcripts, NDAs, encrypted tapes, and the voices of those brave enough to speak. Sheila E. didn't just testify. She delivered the final message of a man who saw the future and feared it. Whether the jury, convicts Diddy or not, the silence Prince spoke about is already shattering. The walls are cracking. The questions are growing louder. Who else knew? How deep does this go? And what happens when the industry's best-kept secrets can no longer be hidden? As we wait for the verdict, remember Prince's final request to Sheila. "Don't let them twist my legacy. Say it loud if I can't." she did. Now it's our turn to keep asking questions, stay alert, and protect the truth, even when it's ugly. If this story moved you, hit that like button, share it, and subscribe for more deep dives that uncover what others are afraid to say.